Great, amazing morning to you. Rise and shine up and at 'em. It is a fabulous Friday's phenomenal Friday, June the 14th. It's Friday. And you all know, what do I historically do? It's Friday. Dun, dun, dun. Thank God it's Friday. I know that's what you all are thinking, right? Like, you ready for that? Like, you ready? Like, you woke up and you're like, it's Friday. So the majority of us, that means no more work for this weekend. We're going into the weekend so you can spend time to rejuvenate and to re-energize and your family and just to reconstruct and reconfigure and everything that means to do over again in preparation for another week, but you don't want to push it. You don't want to sit and think about Monday and next week because we're in the moment right now. And this is where I need you to be, right here, right now on Coffee and Conversation and with Collette. And I'm Collette, and you all know I did my curtsy. That's what I do, to show you reverence because I know that you could be watching anything. As I share with you, I know that you're not participating in everything, but you could be watching something else, talking to the TV, asking them to understand your perspective, hoping that someone who was a guest or maybe the host of the show, the anchor, would repeat back what you said to validate what you believe it to be true. I doubt that you're going to find that on all those other channels. Yeah, it's not going to happen. They don't think that way. And all of them have a position and they stick to it, and then it goes throughout the whole day. So no matter who the host is, they say the same thing throughout the whole day. That's just what it is when you tune into every place else. But when you're right here, TV 33 or Fire Stick or Roku or on our app or Facebook Live or all over the world, like Google Play, we can just talk to all the other avenues that we have, the platforms to be able to engage you. However you reach us this morning, you knew that it was going to be different. And I'm so happy that you did. So on Friday, you know, the second Friday of every month, we're very fortunate because I created a new platform to be able to have us spread our reach, our tentacles, if you will. All right. So there's a component of our second Fridays of the month with our prison reformist activist Eddie Treadwell. He'll be calling in at 8 a.m. from a correctional facility in Michigan. Because I always say that, you know, sometimes when you meet us right where we are, it doesn't work. And a lot of times, if you see a different perspective, if you learn from someone else, if you see how someone else is living, maybe you'll realize how fortunate and blessed you really are. Maybe you'll say, you know what, let me stop complaining because the truth of the matter is I have the opportunity to wake up in a free space. Now, whether your mind is free and you are physically free will change the dynamic. But if you are able to have that opportunity versus waking up in a confined space, knowing that you can't leave this site, knowing that someone dictates your time of day and what you do every second of the day, might change you a little bit. They tell you when to wake up. They tell you when it's lunch break. They tell you when it's dinner time. They tell you when it's recess. They tell you when it's your own time, quiet study time. Whatever it is, someone's consistently telling you, you can't do this, you can't do that. So we'll get into that because I believe that that shapes who we are. And from a continuation on yesterday's show, we were talking about when they see us. And that is the new Netflix, multiple episodes of the Central Park 5 story that filmmaker Ava DuVernay created to recap and re-energize the notion of wrong injustices, or injustices, not wrong, no, injustices towards people of color. And so much so that the prosecutor, there's backlash now. She is now no longer going to be teaching at Columbia Law. She's pushing back and talking about the depiction that Ms. DuVernay gave is not adequate to what she did at that time, blah, 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 blah. Well, at the end of the day, you had 5 gentlemen who were wrongly imprisoned, some for 7 years, others up to 13 years. Then they were all exonerated, but that didn't have a difference on the impact that experience gave them, how it shaped them, And so, of course, then New York wants to give, what, $40 million, and that was broken down to them. And yes, they had the money, but it's time. And we talked about yesterday, time, our most valuable resource. And as I showed you the clip, one of the gentlemen, my heart broke for him because you could still see him as that child. And what did he say? His dad didn't believe him. He believed his dad to be a coward. He believed that after his dad talked to the police officers and he came in, then yelling at him, taking their word and telling him, you need to go ahead and admit to this and you can go home. And so what did he say? I told my dad that I didn't do it, but he made me do it. And then he didn't go home and he made him do it and he didn't speak up for him. And so when the host asked him of that segment, hey, did you ever make it right with your dad? He said no, because he believed his dad to be a coward. And so that had an impact on him. And then he talked about what he teaches his children. What does that look like for them? To stand up for something, to be truthful. And so I'm asking us. And so my takeaway, because it's when they see us, but then I'm going to take it a step further. You know me, right? It's never going to be exactly what it is. If you don't know me by now, you'll never know me. And you know I'm always going to push and going to present something else to us. So it's not about when they see us. It's really about when we see us. Because all of these stories, all this media, all the propaganda, all the images and the depictions consistently reinforce to us who we believe ourselves to be. And a lot of times you say, well, no, Collette, I don't believe that it has an impact. And no, it absolutely does, whether directly or indirectly. Because if it didn't, we wouldn't treat each other the way that we do. I believe that we've created black on black racism. That is where we're going to get to in our hour segment. Black on black racism. Because you'll walk past down the street with a young man that looks like you, won't speak to him. Women will clutch your purse. You'll feel afraid, perhaps feeling threatened by him. He could be your son. He could be your cousin. He could be your nephew. You won't speak to him. But I promise you, I'm going to say it, if a white person walked down the street, you'd give them eye contact. You might, well, it depends. If it's a white woman, and if it's a black man, he might hold his head down, move to the side. If it's a white child, I bet you either, I don't know. I believe there's an indifference. I don't believe that you will look and deal with a black child versus a white child. Black folks versus white folks. How many of us walk past each other and won't even speak to each other? I used to have some folks tell me, especially when I was in Philadelphia, they're like, your energy is so different. You're not like people here. I know you're not from Philly because you walk and you speak to everybody. I said, yes. And it doesn't make a difference because I'd walk and speak to everybody in Detroit and they wouldn't speak to me. So it didn't make a difference where I was. I knew that I was a person of color. And if I walked past you, I at least needed to give you that respect to speak to you. I didn't have to know anything about you. I didn't have to know what your walk of life was. I didn't have to know what your pedigree was. I didn't have to know your family name. I didn't have to know anything. I just knew that I respected you as a person. And if our skin color was the same, when I walked past you, I had to give you that common courtesy to speak to you. But we don't do that. And we don't do it for a plethora of reasons, and we'll get there. And so that kind of shapes our conversation. We're going to open that back up today. All the lines were lit before we got off the air yesterday because there was so much that I wanted to put in there because I wanted you to be able to digest it and think about it. So when we begin our conversation today, I only have 2 clips, and they're short clips. The first, let me give it to you. I think that the New York Times does an amazing justice in the fact that it honors individuals whose obituaries were never presented to them. So that means that the norm wouldn't have gotten this coverage. I believe that everyone has an impact in life, and so everyone has a story to tell, and everyone should be honored when they have transitioned, but specifically for entertainment type folk and the like. So in their segment, they honored Ma Rainey. And I'm going to literally speak what they stated. New York Times overlooked obituaries. Ma Rainey, often called the mother of blues, was the first entertainer to successfully bridge the divide between vaudeville and authentic black Southern folk expression. So this morning, I wanted to give a quick little clip biography, outline the life of Ma Rainey. And she might have been the first woman to sing the blues, but she might as well have been. So take a moment, it's only a couple minutes, so we can sit and pay homage to the life and legacy of the woman that sang the blues, Ma Rainey. Let's take a look.
They called Ma Rainey the mother of the blues.
She blazed the trail that others would walk or sing down.
She was a blues singer when there were no female blues singers.
Gertrude Pridgett, who came to be known as Ma Rainey, started performing as a young teen. She was born in Columbus, Georgia in 1886 and started her career after winning a talent show. She toured in tent shows throughout the South and composed some of her own material, like Lost Wandering Blues and Dream Blues.
Ma Rainey did not have a beautiful voice, but she knew how to deliver her songs. She had gold teeth, and she wore a necklace of gold dollar pieces. She was known as the ugliest woman in show business, although she really wasn't.
By 1923, Rainey's growing popularity earned her a contract with Paramount Records.
Paramount Records was a new company back then, and her records sold very well.
She made more than 100 recordings from 1923 to 1928 and even performed with trumpet player Louis Armstrong.
And she traveled around in a bus, and she had her own show. They had this huge replica of a phonograph on stage, and then the doors of this phonograph would open, and she would step out of this phonograph. That was her big production number.
When she met a young Bessie Smith on the road, she hired her to work in her show. It's rumored that Ma taught Bessie about life, both on and off the stage.
They were the original wild women in American music. Many blues women led Christian lives on Sunday mornings, but for the rest of the week were pretty out there and robust in terms of their sexual lives and their escapades and their gambling and their drinking and even drug use.
They were bad women, and they were singing in these clubs, and they were birthing rock and roll. I always thought I was so revolutionary coming out, and then you hear Ma Rainey saying, "I went out last night with some of my friends. Must have been women's, 'cause I don't like no men's." Come on, this was not popular stuff to be singing back then, or stuff that they even talked about.
The popularity of the blues faded in the 1930s, and Ma returned home to Georgia, where she ran 2 theaters. She died from a heart attack in 1939.
She'll be forever remembered as a very significant figure in not just blues history, but American music history.
Thank you so much, Ma Rainey, for the blues. What did you hear Melissa Etheridge say? Went out last night, must have been with women's, because I don't like no men's. I'm telling you, I tell you, when I was little, my great uncle Andy, bless him, he would play the blues, and I didn't understand. I'm like, what in the world? How could you connect to something like this? I mean, the people's vocals weren't always the best. It always just seemed so sad and dreary. And I'm like, what is going on? And my uncle, bless him, would say, well, Collette, when you live a little, then you'll be able to understand it. And I'm like, what does that mean? You know how you all do. How you do us. You tell us stuff, and we're like, what is that? And then you walk away. And so now I get it, right? Go through a little life. Just have a little bit of life. And when you hear somebody's talking, you remember John Lee Hooker? The blues are a healer all over the land. He did that piece with Bonnie Raitt. I used to play that all the time. But have a little life, and you'll have an appreciation for the blues. So, Ma Rainey, thank you. Thank you for your life and legacy and just sharing your stories in a way that clearly only you could have, that has an impact on us yet today. So thank you so much. So now we're getting into the topic of conversation. When they see us, when we see us, black on black racism. We'll talk about some of the ways in which we are racist against each other. I don't know if you ever thought about it that way, but we'll get into it. But let me go to the line because I want to make sure I get everyone in. I promise you had comments on yesterday you want to share with us. Please call back in because it's our time to have the conversations, because maybe the way that I'm assessing it is not the way that you assessed it. We're going to have a conversation, then I'm going to go into another clip momentarily, and then we'll take it from there. How does that sound on this Friday? Let's see. Thanks for your patience. Great morning to you.
Good morning, Collette, Deputy
Good
Chief.
morning, Deputy Chief. How are you?
I'm great. I'm great. Hey,
Wonderful.
look, when you're talking about John Lee Hooker, you should play his cut, "The Healer."
Yeah, the blues is a healer.
No, he has a cut. He had a cut. It was called "The Healer." He
Oh,
played
it's
with
just the
Santana.
healer.
Right,
Okay, I'm gonna look
right.
that up.
Oh yeah, it's bad.
Please.
But hey, look, I want to thank you for
Oh,
allowing me the opportunity to come on your show last Friday.
yes, my
It
pleasure.
really helped push our organization, Detroiters United LLC, forward.
Good.
A lot of people seeing that came out to the call to action. They see what we're about, and two things: we're laying the foundation for our future, which is our children, grandchildren, great grandchildren. We're giving them the opportunity to learn the political process, get involved in the political process, help future candidates during the election time,
Sure.
and moving forward.
Yeah.
So, like I said, thank you. The members of our organization, thank you,
Oh,
and
my
look
pleasure.
forward to working with you in the future.
Oh, absolutely, it is my pleasure, and I apologize if you all were looking for me. The goal was to be there. I have my mother running around our Saturday time, and before I looked, we were at Eastern Market. It was 3 o'clock. I said, "Oh, this is a mess," and so of course you all know the history. But thank you all. Thank you everyone who showed up. Please feedback, share that with your friends and your colleagues and your family members, because at the end of the day, and hear me, this happens to be one organization, but as I share with you, my belief is no matter where you are, we can support everybody. Like, I don't understand why we think that we can't all have a certain way to get there. But maybe that plays into where we're going today. That when we see us, because it might be this individual, you might not like the way the person presents themselves, or you might think that they're smart, or you might think that they think. Do you hear that the phrasing that I'm saying in there? You might think that they think. You might think that they think. That doesn't mean that that's what they think. It is what you think. It's how you perceive them, which I think hinders us and holds us back from being able to excel. Because it's really not about everybody else. It's not about what's happening downtown. That is happening because it is allowed to happen. Let me just say that. You say that, oh, people won't let you downtown. Well, I don't know why. Who won't let you? There's not an invisible line or a defined line that said once you get to the boulevard, it stops you and there's a gate. Now, there is a movie that I told you that depicts that literally it's a cement brick mansions and you have to go through a guard that was supposed to be Detroit in some futuristic time that you had to be approved to get through this to the downtown. It was a designated area, but that is not in on today, but it is in our minds. And so if you want the opportunities to do things differently, then there's a different way, because if your way is not working, then why not give another group a chance? Why not
Right,
just go and listen to what they have to say? And
right,
and you saw Deputy Chief Amos had an open platform. You could call in, you could question him, you could ask, you could go get more information. I'm sure it was the same way at the actual meeting, that you could ask, question, so you can make the best decision. No one was making you, no one makes you. But if you don't
absolutely,
go to get the information, you can't engage to make the best decision.
right. And I'd just like to add that if
Sure.
anyone have any questions uh, about Detroit United LLC, where we're going, our agenda,
Yeah.
you're more than welcome to call me at 313-399-8290.
Okay. Give that number one more time, please.
Deputy Chief Reggie Claim, 313-399-8290.
That sounds great, everyone. You got the number, so you know what to do. You call. That's what you do. You call him up. He'll give you information. I look forward to having you on the show to give updates. What's next? You're more than welcome. Just let me know.
Okay, appreciate
No problem. Make today amazing. And so maybe that's a great segue. Deputy Chief came on, talked about, because he has a political platform, a political agenda to be able to, their steps. Identify the candidates, raise the money, support the candidates, increase the platform. He shared those components with us on the air when he was a guest on last Friday. And so today that plays on this topic that I'm going to get into, and it's an article that The Atlantic presented. Now, this is back in 2014, and I believe it's so interesting how all information is relevant. Let me say that to you again. All information is relevant. I believe that the thought process cycles itself. When leadership comes in, things happen. When social economic components impact the environment, things happen, impact people, which are the community, which are the catalysts, which shapes the legislation, which shapes who's in office, which shapes how we proceed and how we move every day. Then it's all relevant, because you'll say, oh, well, something that, what do they say? Oh, what's old is new again. So the Atlantic did a article, and it's entitled "Black on Black Racism: The Hazards of Implicit Bias." Let me give that to you because I want you to think through it. Black on black racism. Now, a lot of folks say that, well, the definition between racism and prejudice is that in racism, you have an actual power that can hinder someone's ability to thrive, to be successful. So that means that if I'm the employer, my power is that I cannot employ you. Therefore, you won't have a job, you won't have money, which impacts your life and the like. And the conversation is that people of color can't be racist because they don't construct and hold places of power that influence someone's ability to be able to take care of themselves. That's racism versus prejudice. Prejudice, I might just not like you, and for whatever reason why I don't like you, then that might determine how I engage with you or not engage with you and the like, but it doesn't have an immediate impact on your ability to make a living, to take care of yourself, to take care of your family. So that's the dialogue. You can talk about the differences if you like, not a problem. But for this specific article, it says, Black on Black Racism: The Hazards of Implicit Bias. And then the subtitle is How the Politics of Respectability Twist Society. Okay? Theodore Johnson wrote this piece, and let me give you the opening paragraph if I can. It says, in his year-end press conference, President Barack Obama was asked about the state of Black America. He responded by saying blacks are better off than they were, but juxtaposed that with the lingering issues evidenced in the recent tragic police encounters with unarmed black men. Interestingly, he took particular care in calling out the hidden biases that we all carry around, a sentiment he echoed in another recent interview. Let me go to the next paragraph. He states, my own hidden biases punched me in the gut last week as I stared in disbelief at a test result on my computer screen. Before I started the racial bias assessment, and I implore everyone to pull up and take a racial bias assessment. You'd be very surprised at what the findings are as it pertains to your answers. That's like when you walk down the street, like I asked you, and you see a person of color, what do you do? Those types of scenarios. But let me finish his point. Before I started the racial bias assessment, a disclaimer explicitly warned me that those who are not prepared to receive uncomfortable news should not proceed. I was too intrigued to turn back, but it turns out I was unprepared for the outcome. According to the implicit association test, I have a, quote, strong automatic preference for European Americans compared to African Americans. That's a sterile way of saying that I'm biased against black people. For most people, such a designation would probably be unsettling. After all, the United States is a nation that ostensibly aspires not to judge others by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. But for me, it caused a mini existential crisis. Why? Because I'm black. So, I'm asking us today. I thought the statement was profound. Let me give it to you again. The nice way of saying is that I have a strong automatic preference for European Americans compared to African Americans. I have a strong automatic preference. So you prefer white folk over black folk. How many of us prefer white folk over black folk? How many of us shape our conversations day to day that shows that we prefer white folk over black folk? I'm just saying, think about it for a second. When there's crisis in the education system in the communities, what do? We want to move out to the suburbs. When there's a crisis in housing or we get assistance for housing where we could stay in environments and communities that look like us, what do? We move out to the suburbs. When we amass a certain amount of money, thank you, Renee. We amass a certain amount of money or we have a certain socioeconomic status, what do? We insulate ourselves in spaces with people that we believe have this commonality to us. But what's the real commonality when you get to a certain socioeconomic status? I'm asking. What does that look like for us? When we go out to eat, if those of us have a certain means, or even those who don't, what do? We're the first to head to the hills because we want to go out to Ocean Prime. We want to go out to Ruth Chris, Morton's. We want to go out to McCormick and Smith. We want to go out. That's where, and we want to go out to the suburbs. We want to go out and show them that our money spends. We want a good time. That's where we go. We go for our shopping experiences. We prefer to go in places where people might look at you a little strange, but that you want to spend, but they don't really want you there anyway. When we go and have these luxury hotel experiences, you like to go out to the Townsend in Birmingham because you like to say that I'm in Birmingham and I'm hanging out on Main Street in Birmingham and that's where I'm going to dine and sit down because we believe that that brings us some type of what? A privilege. It makes you feel better that you're able to go in those places. When you want services, so many of you then choose to go out to suburban places. I want to go out to a doctor in the suburbs. I want to go. I had an experience a year or so ago. A friend of mine at the time was having an immediate emergency, had health insurance. I'm going right here to Providence. Now, I've only experienced Providence under a emergency type room situation, right? And that was several years back, didn't know too much about it. This person is bending over in pain, like about to just go unconscious. Oh no, we can't go here. Take me any place but here. Why not West Bloomfield? Why not da da da? Well, because I'm like, are you kidding me? You're about to pass out right now. I don't know what's going on. And this is, well, no, because black folk are here. So the perception is that your health is going to be better. Your doctors are supposed to be better. Your dentists are supposed to be better. All that's supposed to be better. If you go and you're in a space, a strong affection or affinity to be with European people. Where did that come from? You were taught that. That wasn't your original thinking because everything was birthed into you. Is that any difference with the way that women, black women, should present themselves? So you prefer someone who's a fair shade. You prefer someone who has straighter hair. You prefer someone that, do I need to go on? I told you when I wear my hair out and natural and wild, and it has some curly, wild textures and the like, I told you that a gentleman who's one of my mentors told me, if you straighten your hair, you'd get a man. I said, are you kidding me? What does that have to do with anything? Well, we like straight hair. Based on what? I mean, I'm trying to understand what in our experience and our history, for the majority of us, has that depiction of beauty. What does that look like? So we're biased. I can go on and on about what we prefer, but maybe you're not even directly understanding what you prefer because it's been so subliminally presented into you that you don't even look at it that way. So there's an internal, you're a black person, black self in a white world. We're going to go to a break. I have a clip when we come back because I want to have a deeper understanding. Maybe you didn't realize that your racism is internalized, but today you will. Don't go anywhere. Get your coffee. I have mine ready, your tea, your juice, your water, whatever is pleasing to the palate, because we're going to continue this conversation on the Friday edition of Coffee and Conversation with Collette. We'll be right back. right here on TV 33. We're so proud to announce on Wednesday, 7 a.m., we're going to have a conversation that matters. It's called Cannabis, the business of the cannabis industry. We're going to address everything from medicinal, recreational, legislation, finance, edibles, and more. No more are we going to be in a space where we are not empowered to make an industry work for us. We're now in a space where this billion-dollar industry is taking the world by storm, but you wouldn't know what to do with that if you didn't have the adequate information. I'm ready to give it to you. So excited about the conversation. On Wednesday, 7 a.m., right here on TV 33, we're going to have that conversation that matters. And I promise you, as we always say, you will be educated, enlightened, and empowered. Look forward to seeing you again for the business of cannabis. Cannabis with Collette. I'll see you then.
Imagine the rare opportunity to be positioned in front of an industry that still has a product just like water every human being on the planet needs to maintain itself, but yet still in its infancy, virtually unknown to most of the world. An opportunity that until now has been unattainable for the masses. Our company is Wakana. We are Wakana, what you've imagined.
If you want to make sure you stay in good conversation, you gotta tune in to Coffee and Conversation with Collette. That's me. Thursday mornings from 7 a.m. to 8 a.m. on the only station, WHPR TV 33. See you soon. Welcome back, welcome back. You're still tuned in to Coffee and Conversation with Collette on this Friday edition as we're discussing when we see us, black on black racism. And so I'm going to continue before we go to the clip with this phenomenal article. And so the author, Theodore, says, well, he was really shocked because it showed that he had a preference for European Americans because he was black. And he states, as I read the results, I thought about what it means to be black and biased against other black people. Does it mean harboring a subconscious contempt for my race? Or considering myself to be part of a blessed segment of an otherwise unfortunate lot? Is it even possible for a black person to be racist against black people? In a moment of self-dramatization, I felt as if Kanye had just announced on national television that I don't care about black people. Then the trope saturated my thoughts. I wondered if my bias was an undergirding of the sort of intra-race prejudice colloquially expressed in phrases like Uncle Tom, crab in a barrel, acting white. Since my results were the same as 88% of the white Americans who show bias in favor of white people, it seems to me that this demonstrated strong preference, quote, is a very definition of acting white. A well-worn pejorative that pained me as an awkward adolescent and suddenly felt fresh again. Did you get that? So living in a black self, white world. I just want that to sink in. If you take a moment and think about all the experiences that you've had, all the conversations that you've had, if you think about the clips that I showed yesterday, the New York Times op-eds that said, okay, what it looked like for black men growing up black, what does that look like, the privilege of white folk, that everything about our existence has been to work to be the best self that emulates them. So what do they say? If you're speaking correctly, then you're talking white. Oh, if you go to private schools or you have a different experience or you acting white. If you don't listen to certain musics, you're acting white. Do you get? Think about all this. And then, even if you didn't have those experiences, but subconsciously, can you recall a time, do you live in that space? I've talked to some folks who are men, specifically, who are darker complexion, have darker complexion. They say they won't date a dark sister. I've known light-skinned brothers that said they won't date light-skinned sisters. They'll only date dark-skinned sisters. I've known light-skinned women that said they only will date light-skinned men. I mean, do you think about those things? What does that inherently look like for you? How has that shaped what it looks like? Even growing up, little kids, and they see each other. Oh, if she has a different texture hair, oh, that's good hair. Especially if she's light-skinned. Then, oh, everybody, oh, I like her. Why do you like her? Because she's light-skinned. She's yellow bone, red bone. Y'all heard, don't act like you don't know this morning. You're very clear about it. That's why they came out with those skin lightening creams. Because if you thought that there was something wrong, if your skin was too dark, then you could lighten it. I mean, that's what's happening in Africa right now. The whole lightening craze of skincare lines is huge now. Everybody wants straight European wigs, weaves. Everyone wants lighter skin, because we're all trying to prescribe to what this ideology of beauty is. Says who? Based on what? We won't even get to the understanding of then the intellectual component, because see, we'll follow them on certain things, but we won't follow them on everything. When you're talking about trying to open up a book, we don't think that's cool. You won't do that. When you sit and talk about establishing your business and supporting each other the way they support each other, you won't do that. So why don't we follow them in everything? But if we weren't their mindset, then maybe we would support each other. So maybe we're just black in color, but everything about us is white. Our ideology is white as it pertains to how we look at and support and perceive each other when we see us. I'm going to take it a step further. There's a clip we're about to go to, and it's called Black Self, White Folk. And he gives a different perspective, but I want us to take a look. It's only a few minutes long, so don't worry. It helps shape the narrative. Let's take a look.
So I'm in a job interview, and the interviewer asks me, talk about a time you've been a victim of racism or discrimination. I smirked because I knew to expect this question. And smugly I said, I have never been the victim of racism or discrimination. 3 months prior, I was sitting at a table with a group of colleagues, and we were talking about privilege and prejudice. And I said, I don't understand this privilege and prejudice thing. People are successful because of the hard work that they put in. I'm successful because of the hard work I've put in. And if anyone isn't successful, that's because they just haven't worked hard enough. I'm sure we've heard these things before. I grew up in Pikesville, a suburb of Baltimore. It's an upper middle class area, Jewish. My parents were young when we moved to this neighborhood, and I remember there being a real sense of pride when we moved to the county. Wow, we live near white people now. We made it. And even though I lived in an affluent zip code, the mansions that I saw, you couldn't find exactly on my street. I went to school with many of the people who lived in those big houses. I was in advanced classes in school, and so most of my classmates were white. And I made really strong, awesome relationships with many of them. They would say things like, Jabari, tell us about how black people do this. And why can't they swim? And all of these things. So I would joke and laugh and try and, give them some knowledge. I began changing the way I dressed. I was wearing American Eagle and Abercrombie when I could fit it. And listening to pop and rock. And for the most part, my family just made fun of me. But one thing that my parents said that was pretty important that I learned that it was, they said, Jabari, sweetheart, you're black. And that means something. You can have white friends, you can love them, you can trust them, but at the end of the day, you're black, and that means something. Racism is real. Well, at that time, I thought these were just black people talking about racism. Again. Little did I know that it was much more than that. So I ended up getting the job at the nonprofit. I was doing low-income LGBT work in Baltimore City. And I had this brilliant black queer woman as a supervisor. I was networking with leaders all over the city, and I was really learning how systems interacted in people's lives. Housing, juvenile justice, education, transportation, healthcare. I was also in school at the time. I was a gender and women's studies major at UMBC. And this program really helped me deeply study concepts that I didn't really spend much time with in high school. I learned about redlining. I learned about state-sanctioned violence and how gender violence is often underscored by racial violence. At the same time, this was 2015. I had lived through the news of Eric Garner and Tamir Rice. My lens was changing. I was no longer a black boy going to school in Pikesville, Maryland. I was becoming a black man living and working in Baltimore City. So for one of my job assignments, I put together a training conference for colleagues all over the country. I was the coordinator. And when they arrived here in Baltimore, I got off the bus and I said, "Hey, I'm Jabari, I'm the coordinator." And they looked at me and became confused and visibly uncomfortable. I remember it was raining that day, and so I rented a van so that folks didn't have to walk around the training site in the rain. I said, "Come on in the van." They said, "We'd rather walk." The folks who were in the van with me referred to me as their chauffeur. They told me I should hold doors for them. At meals, they sat with me and they said, "You know what? I want to sit with you so you don't think that we're being weird or, God forbid, racist." They were saying stereotypical things, comparisons, statements. And at the end, I felt so emotionally drained. I referred to my brilliant supervisor, who happened to be a participant of the training. And I said, "What, was that racism?" And she said, "Yes, baby, it is." And immediately, years of suppressed memories came back. I remember laughing it off with my friends when they used the N-word. I remember black peers making fun of me because of the way I dressed and the way that I talked. And most importantly, I remember that message that my parents told me when I was young. You're black. Racism is real. And I guess I never wanted to believe that we could really live in a world where we treat each other this way. So afterwards, I was studying and learning of what I can do about this thing called racism. I learned about internalized racism. Internalized racism happens when black folks, people of color, start to behave or act in manners that uphold whiteness and white supremacy. Donna Bivens, who is a consultant and a writer for the Women's Theological Center, says that internalized racism is a system all in itself. It has its own life, and therefore its own system of rewards and consequences. And that black folks are unconsciously rewarded when we participate in internalized racism. And I read that and I said, you know what, I feel that. We are rewarded when we embrace white standard English and abandon African American vernacular English. We are rewarded when we start to adopt white lifestyles and styles of music, which is almost always characterized as more luxurious. These are things that I realized that were going on in my own life forever. I grieved for a really long time after that training. Not only did I realize that racism exists, but I was embarrassed. I thought, how could I learn it this way? How could I abandon the narratives that my ancestors set forth? How could I reject all of the wonderful evidence there was that racism was real? But I realized that there was no degree, no job, no pair of shoes, no preference for medium rare steaks that's going to protect you from the violence of racism. And I felt embarrassed that I learned it this way. Even as I was preparing this speech, I wondered, how is this going to be received? Black kid grows up in rich white neighborhood, white people were mean to him, and that's how racism, that's how he learned it. But it wasn't how Eric Garner or Tamir Rice or Rakia Boyd or Corinne Gaines or Maya Hall or any of these people learned it. So there was some privilege in how I grew up, and I had to learn about that. But that doesn't absolve me from being shot down in the streets, because at the end of the day, I am black. So today, I am a nonprofit leader in Baltimore. I'm executive director of an organization where I get to give back to LGBT youth every day, particularly LGBT youth of color. I'm also president of Baltimore's LGBT Community Center. Being a black gay man, you really start to see how whiteness operates even in spaces of inclusion and diversity. I saw the millions of dollars and droves of support for marriage equality, but today hear the deafening silence when we talk about the deaths and murders of trans women of color. So this gay rights movement, I wonder, what would the gay rights movement look like today if being gay was something that only someone black could be. So I've learned a couple of lessons. First, racism is real. Internalized racism is real. I'm a victim of it, and I'm learning to be a survivor of it. Today, it's probably the most important lesson that I've ever learned. I've learned to love myself in ways that I never thought that I could, because that's what internalized racism does. It seeks to decimate your own culture. But today, I walk proudly down the street as a black man, as a gay man. 2, I learned that black folks or people of color can be operants of white supremacy if they're not checked, but to no fault of their own. Whiteness is pervasive, it's powerful, and sometimes we don't even know how it shows up in our world. But most importantly, 3, I've realized that being black in America is one of the most unique, amazing, and beautiful revolutionary things that I could ever do. And black love and black joy is something to be cherished and honored. And I'm so proud that I've learned that lesson and so grateful. Thank you for listening to me.
So thankful to TEDx for that clip. And did you get it? Some takeaways. Internalized racism. Whiteness is pervasive. Black folk are unconsciously rewarded for adopting white standards. Come on, let's talk about it. Y'all a little quiet today. I don't know are you thinking about it? Did you ever look at it that way? That everything that we aspire to do, everything that we work for, everything that defines us to be successful in this environment that says that we're these great citizens of the United States of America is based on a model that has nothing to do with us. It's based on a model of how they live. And so for us to be successful, black folk are unconsciously rewarded for adopting white standards. So maybe to Brother Tyrone's point about what downtown looks like and what all the black city council aren't doing, it's because black folks are unconsciously rewarded for adopting white standards. So now I'm city council. I'm supposed to do what's best for the people. If the majority of the people happen to be black folk who are not medium income, then my legislation is going to be for those who pay me. So I'm unconsciously rewarded. Because the folks that are in the less than these and those categories, this legislation, these policies don't benefit them. Or if I just go along to get along, then guess what? Okay, I'll be rewarded. Come on now. Unconsciously rewarded. Whiteness is pervasive. Everything that we do. What does it look like? When you get some money, you want to go spend it up, and you want to drive a big car. Remember that was the whole thing back in the day about black folks weren't buying Cadillacs. We weren't the target market for Cadillacs. But when the economy changed and white folk couldn't buy Cadillacs, then black folks started buying Cadillacs, and it was about the money then, so it was okay for a black man to be with a Cadillac because he could afford a Cadillac. So then I'm going to open it up. So then everybody, when you thought you amassed something, you had a Cadillac. Diamond in the back, sunroof top, digging in the scene with my gangster lean. So I thought I had to show that I'm doing something. Unconscious rewards. Because I'm in a Cadillac, because they drove Cadillacs, so now we can buy Cadillacs. So my value is based on when I can do what they do. But the problem is, when we take on all of what they do, how does it impact who we are? Let's see what you have to say. Thanks for your patience. Great morning to you.
Good morning, Queen.
Good morning, King.
Yeah, excellent subject as usual.
Thank you, King.
You know, Queen.
Yeah.
You know, white supremacy.
Yeah.
You know, when you sit back and analyze it has actually captured the whole world. You know, and it's dealing with really the mind itself or whatever.
Yeah.
And we as a people, at 464 years, actually have been programmed. You know, the mind is, it's like a computer records everything.
Yes.
And there's a possibility that, individual having the knowledge of how to actually interfere with your natural thoughts, your natural activities.
Yes.
And they have learned that, but they were taught how to master the original people. So they have mastered the whole planet. And as Dr. Quest's Francis Wellens would say, white supremacy it rings, it's at the top.
Yeah.
And within all of us, because we are not who we are, because we've been made into them.
Yes.
So
and stay there, King, because what you said was so profound. Did you hear what he said? He said that we are not who we are. And I'm going to take it a step further. Do we even know who we are? Because when we try to attach it to our history in Africa, there's so many of us, oh no, we don't want to be attached to Africa. Oh no, we won't even get along and speak to Africans. So we don't want to attach ourselves to that. We don't know anything about where we are right now and what our history is, a majority of us, past our grandparents. Maybe some of us can go to our great-grandparents. So we don't have any spheres of reference to be able to say, this is from whence I've come. And then to another point that you made, and I want you to finish your thought, but it triggered, whiteness is international. Think about it. Adolf Hitler created, and literally would have been successful in this dominance of blonde hair, blue-eyed superiority. He was nowhere close to blonde hair and blue-eyed. Did you think about that? That's not who Adolf Hitler was. But in his mind, the depiction of superiority was blonde hair and blue-eyed. Y'all get what subconsciously has happened to us? Please continue.
And like you say, we don't know. But when one has been taught the history of how the Caucasian raising came about, it came about through birth control, and actually came about, understand, to destroy the darker to save the lighter.
Okay.
And that was 600-year period that it took to actually produce that type of mindset in the vehicle that would actually carry that mindset throughout the planet.
Okay.
It was a 600-year period that it took. And so, like you say, that's in all people who looks other than us. You'll find that in the Chinese people because they are the closest to white people. You'll find that in Japanese people because they're close to the Chinese people or whatever. And then you have all these other ones who have come about through the race mixing in what they call the Middle East area. It's like, it bothers me when I see so-called Arabs, and they would try to attach themselves to the pyramids and the different monuments and whatnot in that area that we call Africa or whatever. They try to act as if they've always been there.
Yeah.
And they don't know their history, but a lot of times we sit back and we listen to them, and they're, how they tell their story.
Yes.
And they don't include us. No one includes us in the story of the planet Earth. No one.
Yeah.
But yet our fathers had left signs everywhere on the planet to prove to us one day we may wake up to see that we have always been all over the planet.
Right.
Our home is the planet. It wasn't just what they call Africa.
Right.
The planet is our home.
Yes.
And we can prove without a shadow of doubt with anybody that we were first. We can do that genetically, biologically. We can do it anthropologically or whatever, and prove that we are the first and that everybody came after us. And we can tell you when they came and when they're about to leave.
Well, stay there for a minute. The truth of the matter is, and I'm going to say it, and I know it's okay. I get it all the time anyway. We don't want to go back to claim who we are, just like we won't claim that Jesus wasn't white. Now, I said it. You all think about it. How many folks grew up in households with the big white picture of the Jesus with the blonde hair, and he has the hand out, and everybody had that in their house with a picture with John Kennedy? Y'all remember that? Yeah, Kennedy and Jesus picture. And you went to your churches. I grew up Baptist every Sunday, and you were in there, and you had the picture of Jesus. Then it ain't nobody thought, if you read the dynamics, even just of the Bible, just read. Remember now, and I'm not putting all this ownership on the Bible because I know that that's a man-made document as well. But if you just think about the region of it, there's no way that Jesus was blonde hair and blue eyed.
Absolutely right.
But we didn't even question that. We think about it. There are people to this day that will fight you if you even think about trying to tell them that Jesus wasn't blonde hair and blue eyed. And you're like, okay, but what kind of sense does this make? Because the same people that oppressed you gave you that imagery, the same folks that told you that's who you're supposed to believe in, the same folks that then use the Bible to oppress you, the same folks then that look like you who are using black on black racism to oppress you every Sundays in the pulpits, they oppress you in the political structures outside of the pulpits. That's what we're doing. But we want to act like it doesn't exist because, again, we are unconsciously rewarding the adopted white standards. Come on, you all. I got to get ready to go to break. I appreciate the call. The lines are lit. And we're going to bring in Eddie after the top of the hour. King, if you want to hold on, you can. Not a problem. But we're going to continue the conversation, and we're going to get to the truths of the matter. No one says that we're not going to have a little bump and bruise every now and then. And it's going to be uncomfortable. But you have to question what has been presented to you so that you can understand right where you are, why you do what you do, why you treat people the way that you do, the values that you have, and then it determines how you move in this world, how you move in this America. If you're able to make the America work for you, but it'll never work for you if you keep treating people that look like you the way the other people do. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back for more coffee and conversation right after the hour.